Harleyquinn. I'm KayPike, and today I'm gonna show you how to shapeshift into Harley. Jumping right in here, Puddin'. As you can see, I start with capital showmanship when I'm doing a Harlequinn paint. Not many people know this, but you can paint your hair with body paint the exact same way as you paint your skin. Watch the colors though. Some stain more than others, but think of it as a nice tone or a tint. It'll wash out eventually. Well, that is for the glycerin paints. Make sure you're using the cake paints, the water activated kinds. I have a little bit of glycerin based paint on beneath. What you see me doing is going over with a cream based makeup to rough out the lines, marking out the edges of everything and trying to get the shoulder pads very symmetrical. Don't ever do this on a model, but on yourself. You can notice that on the cream sticks, I will often blur out the lines to try to get a more stable edge because you can push and pull when you're blurring the line. You can see I'm focusing on the perspective angle of the shoulder pads. She's got these really cool roller derby style shoulder pads. I take the time to obsess over anything that's a hard edge detail if I'm doing a soft edged character. Soft edge means mostly flesh tones, very few milled shapes, so not a lot of metal. So if there is something sharp and that's something that should have perspective treatments, I will take the extra time to give it the illusion shape. Because Harley is mostly a fabric, I'm gonna get those shoulders right. Whenever you're doing one of these, you wanna get your money's worth, your time's worth out of the illusions that you're able to paint. On soft characters, you'll often notice me doing floating necklaces, or really interesting depth tricks on the tops of belts, or in this case in the shoulder pads. You have very few opportunities to flex your skills, so take time whenever you have the opportunity to do your best job. Going in with a glycerin-based cake paint here that's nice pigmented. I believe it's a fab, face and body. Awesome product. I'll try to put links down below. I'm going around the edges trying to mark out wherever shadow lines would be. Color blocking with a medium tone. I actually rarely do this, but this is well lit and with white lighting. You'll notice I often have my bananas lighting going all over the place in my paints, but this one I wanted that hard contrast. Harley is a showstopper. Let's put her in the spotlight. So she's very well lit with a slight downlight. So what I'm doing is I'm focusing that shadow kind of wherever there's edges of fabric. Thinking about where the sleeves end on the arms, and you can see that under the chin, you can see that under the vest. I'm just thinking of my light source is a little bit up and a little bit far away. It's not too contrasty. Like Harley's outfit is enough contrast. One thing that you'll often see me do is go in with these dual-ended brushes. It lets you carry a lot of pigment on one side, apply it on your body, and then bring it out in a narrow way with small brush strokes immediately without putting your paint down, without putting your brush down. This gets important when your paints are 14 hours long. You can do more complex things if you do them a bit more efficiently, and every second helps. I'm going in with a glycerin-based white paint. I believe this is Paradise White. Oh, it smells so delicious. You'll notice that I'm being super careful to tease more white pigment in, however. White paint is the devil for body paint. I do not know why. It is the most likely to crack, to flake. It's hard to build normally, but once you learn the different products, it can be worthwhile to experiment when you get the layering techniques down. And I've been trying my best to show you all these, but if you have any questions at any time, ask below or when I'm live or however, I'm here to help you. I'll actually try to use as little actual white as I can in a painting and do my very best to fill in with grays or other soft color lighting. You'll notice that I'm color blocking fairly slowly. Even though I could just hose myself down in white paint and call it a day, I'm pushing whites and grays very carefully where I would want musculature, where I would want shadows to be, just one little bit at a time. This keeps pigment from building up. It also helps you retain your lighting illusion. Just so carefully going in a little bit lighter, then a little bit darker. Wash, rinse, repeat. Wait, don't wash, no! You'll notice that my non-dominant arm fills up first. That is just fine, even though some level of dexterity is needed to paint your own right arm. It's always better to do the easier one first, because then you have a point of reference. A point of reference for symmetry, a point of reference for shadow, for lighting, and you can resolve things a lot easier in your brain if you have something to look at in the mirror. Paint with your dominant hand first. I highly recommend. I have tried it the other way, but the more you can look and say, is this symmetrical? Yes, no. The more you can make those like little personal checks as you go. As I start going in with the red paint, you'll see that I start with the hottest color first. I have this rule for making things look kind of surreal and more like they're drawn. Use a hot highlight and a cool low light, or a cool highlight and a warm low light. It's strange and it kind of adds more contrast in your brain, makes things look a lot more fill-tooled and like you're using a lot more color lighting than there actually can exist. Brings you into the 2D world a little bit more. You'll also notice that I'm giving a huge margin when I'm painting my reds. Red pigments are super aggressive. They like to bleed, one little smudge or there's too much water and I'll get all into the gray. you're gonna get this pink mess. So give yourself a lot of padding and a lot of room to paint with the brightest and hottest color first, because it's a lot easier to go darker than it is to go lighter. Preparing for that color pop pudding. Looks so good with that first little bit of a layer down and glitch on through. This is one of my favorite parts. This is when it gets weird. I am painting my flanks. That fun cutout illusion. I will tend to go over with a few layers of Global Strong Black. It's the most important here that you get a very, very matte black. However, use a glycerin-based cake paint if you can. It's incredibly hard to wash off when it's on your back. Be sure to go back fairly far, but don't go back so far that you make your life difficult later. Just whatever you think would show up on camera if you're doing a motion animation. What you see me doing here is now I'm going in with a fine brush and putting in the darkest spots of the fabric folds. It would be nearly impossible to recover white paint on top of that, as bright as I might like it. Everyone always asks, how do I get my colors so bright? I make sure that I put them on in the proper order. Then laying down a medium tone of red and then the super dark contrasting lowlights. Gives it that cool kind of burn tool effect. A way to create a little bit more depth and dimension in your shadows is add that middle intermediary tone before putting on your super, super dark tones. You might say. Are you learning anything, Puddin'?
Well, if this is excellent educational content, please consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon, that I can create more of these videos. Likewise, if you like my art, it would make me very happy if you would check out my NFTs.
After I have gone and put on that intermediary color and that low light, now I'm going over with a cream stick. Because I am layering colors, I want to put that barrier in between the glycerin. If I just put a glycerin white paint on top that was driven by water, that was activated by water, it would just mix with the colors down below and end up with pink. And I'm trying to keep the whites crisp and the blacks crisp as much as I can. So putting down the cream stick color, that other kind of makeup, as you could use a hybrid or an airbrush paint for this step as well, it keeps the colors from creeping into one another. One of the reasons you see me go in here with a fine brush and a little bit of hybrid paint, getting those edges right. Glitch on through here. And I'm going to be using the cream stick to add a highlight pass to build depth in the bullets in her belt. Basically adding a foundation to add the color, the depth, and all the shapes on afterward. The belt shape itself is just a bit of black paint with a relief where I want the highlights to be, to try to maintain a perspective line. A way to elongate your torso when you have to shrink it because you're only painting waist up is to show that you can see on the top of the belt. Kind of as if you were standing a little bit taller, the camera angle is a little bit higher than what it actually is. It's just another illusion. Going in with yellows and reds to really give some like nasty vibrancy to the bullet colors in particular. I love saturating my colors. You don't say it, KayPike, but seriously. Just like if you were working on a traditional canvas, you often have to move your canvas around to get your perspective right, tilt it on different angles or however. You have to do that with your human canvas as well, so you'll often see me pitching weird angles. After I have a beautiful base coat down, let's go in and detail. Doing details like this are completely necessary to me. I'm trying to make sure that all the little shapes look like cylinders, and also that the star has this kind of really cool bevel to it. Never skip the step of what would this be in real life for this person to buy this thing to wear. How does that shape come out of the factory? When it's milled or when it's pressed? This is really a form of fine art cosplay. You still have to think of everything as a wearable, functional item. Going in and trying to capture the crisp now. Hybrid black paint so it doesn't mix with the glycerin underneath. And I am remembering that I am painting this very bright, and even though I am trying to make the top of the belt separated from my waist there, my light source is catching top down so I don't have a big booming shadow in that direction. And chasing my light source around the canvas, this is the part of the paint where you have to think about your light source the most, because now we separate the clothes from the skin. I'm kind of trying to imply that there's a tension line between her cape and the top of her little shirt thing, and that we'd be pulling it away from her body. Just right there where there's a change of depth. And to illustrate this then, I'd be putting these little shadows underneath it, because remember we were doing the top-down lighting, a very bright ambient white light. However, if we don't move that shadow just a little bit away, it won't show like it's falling onto anything, and therefore not hovering away from the skin. Speaking of skin, you can see I'm just like, I see too much human weird flesh tones. I want to be a cartoon now. There's just a point in the paint when you're done being human. Notice especially when I'm doing my color fill, I'll keep swapping my brushes. It's another way to keep your colors crisp and to keep from getting other tones in that you might not want. If you want to look like a comic or if you want to look like digital art, you have to remember there is a fill tool, there is a palette. So here, as I am going between the whites and the grays, it's 3 different brushes to try to mimic if you were able to just click a palette fill tool. It's really important and it helps keep your colors consistent across the entire project, which again leads to that sort of digital illusion. And then creating a shadow by going in with a little bit of glycerin paint and then going over with the line. Just to make sure that it has that like hard, final last contrast locked in. When I'm creating depth in the sleeves, I'm creating a little bit of a vanishing point at the top of the cuff. It's kind of like there's an off-shoulder jacket going on somewhere in behind what I'm wearing. There's a fair amount of this is a body paint, not a costume going on, but it turns out really good. You'll see me go in and refine the edges an awful lot in fabric, especially because I want this to be a crisper fabric. I'm making sure I don't have too many brush strokes left, so I'm going and making sure that I'm filling anything that looks a little bit sketchy, a little bit hand-drawn as best as I can. Mostly using the edge of a brush and a really heavy amount of pigment. Things tend to go lighter on elbows and the back sides of arms where you might not be looking so much, so I'm always careful to do a second pass always. The curse of working with a three-dimensional canvas. For her skin details themselves, I'm just keeping everything kind of light. Just rough comic, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of line, and mostly focusing on the clothing for this one. You have to make design decisions in every one of your paints, like what you want to express in the character. What brings you joy and what's exciting. What's exciting is not that she's like this pale version of Harley Quinn, but it's her fun and ridiculous outfit, this post-apocalyptic and Booster Gold's goggles and all of this. So that is where I'm putting the energy of this paint, is showing off Harley's new clothes. Now the paint just starts coming all together, just getting those last little bits of highlights on for depth. It's easier when you're so tired after, I don't know, at this point, from 6 a.m. to around 11 p.m. day, to do that final pass with your dominant hand. It really is. And you'll notice in a sec how I start collecting brushes all in one hand. That is trying to keep colors organized for the last little highlight bit of black, white, and red. This is because by this time in the paint I'll have about 30 brushes out on the desk. Remember, use a different brush for every single hue and color and shade. And the queen of showmanship strikes again. Let's just pin this up to see how it looks. Let's see if we can tie it in. You can also paint the fabrics. Get ready to meet your new and improved Harley Quinn. I bet you Harley recognized me. I had a smashing good time. I'd like to start with a big shout out to everybody who's gone to bat for me.
Let's give a yippee for everybody on Patreon! And a big shout out to anybody who has been collecting my NFT art. Be sure to check the description for any of the product links and where we can connect on social media. Feel free to ask questions in the comments below, Puddin'. And what character do you want to see me put up here? Well, shapeshifters, that's enough clowning around for now. See you soon.